Thank you, and I want to express my appreciation to all of you for agreeing to serve as a reviewer and participating in this webinar training. The ELCC is able to operate because of efforts from people like yourselves that are willing to contribute your time, your effort, and your energy into creating better principal preparation programs. So again, thank you for your time today on behalf of Honor and the entire ELCC group. This will be a very informative afternoon for you, and look forward to working with you as reviewers as you engage in this process.
Thank you, Dick. Dick has been an awesome leader of the ELCC for many years now, and we're just so lucky to have him and his time and all that. I will explain Dick's role in this whole process as we go through it. Some of you are reviewers who have been with us for many years, and you're basically here to get a re-review on the 2011 ELCC standards and policies. And then others of you are brand new to the process. And for those of you that are brand new, definitely like to welcome you and add you to our team of reviewers. The ELCC, which stands for the Educational Leadership Constituent Council, is really part of the overall CAEP accreditation review process. It used to be called NCATE. Now it's switched to CAEP, C-A-E-P. And the ELCC is one specialized professional association within that accreditation process. Our ELCC program review process only looks at educational leadership programs, whether they're at the district level or building level. That could include principal preparation programs, superintendent preparation programs, teacher leader preparation programs, supervisor programs, any kind of preparation program at a college or university that is going through CAEP accreditation has to be reviewed through us if they submit a program report in the CAEP accreditation system. So our job, basically the CAEP timeline for program reviews, you see in front of you, we do it twice a year. We do it once in the fall and once in the spring. As a reviewer for the ELCC, we require that you at least be available for one of those review cycles. We don't require both, but at least one. So what I've tried to do is give you that timeline so that you can plan either one of those to be available to do reviews for us. And the review process is done electronically. You basically would receive something from NCATE or CAEP, I keep calling it NCATE, but it's CAEP now, asking you about your availability for one of these cycles. And basically you will, indicate on that. Some of you may have already gotten that. It's called a conflict of interest form, and you basically indicate which institutions you can review without a conflict of interest and whether you're available to complete reviews. So our spring review cycle, as you can see, is about to begin. Teams are being formed now within the next couple of weeks. I do this training prior to every review session to help get new reviewers into the process and also to help retrain current reviewers so that you're ready. Now, as part of this training, this is the webinar training right now at stage 1. We have found that the best kind of training is when you actually get to apply what you've learned almost immediately into the review process. It's an extensive review, and it's all done online. You're put into teams of 2, and you're basically giving a set of reports, program reports to review within a given time frame. And you can do that anywhere. It's all through the AIMS system, the CAEP AIMS system, which is an electronic program review process. And we have found that the best training is to do this webinar training first. Make sure you're qualified. And what that means is basically after we're done with this training, I'm going to send you 1 to 2 assessments for you to review via email. And I'm going to ask you, I'll give you a blank report form, and I'm going to ask you to do your review, write up your comments, and then send your mock report back to me. We have a rubric that our audit committee developed for giving you an evaluation of your written responses to those assessments. Basically, this is not a gotcha sort of thing. It's basically our check to see if you understand what I've done in this webinar training. It's a feedback stage. You know, basically, if you kind of get stumped on something, it's my opportunity to follow up with you one-on-one and give you direct one-on-one guidance on any kind of questions that may come up. The hardest thing with these reviews, as probably Dick can tell you, is that every report is different. And it seems like we tell them what parts to submit, but every assessment is different. Some are, you know, there's no standardization. So basically your job is to evaluate that, look at what they've written, does it make sense, and I'll help guide you in certain ways, but you're kind of on your own, and it's an independent sort of work. And we require that you write things back in a certain way. We like to see certain things. Our audit committee has certain policies that we like for you to take into consideration as you're doing your review. So there's a lot that goes into this, and that feedback stage is kind of where we help you one-on-one to help you with that. Remember, you're only doing this once or twice a year, so again, this isn't your full-time job. This is not even part of your job. You're doing this out of the graciousness of your heart and to help the profession move. And so it's understandable if you don't understand or grasp everything I'm going to go through with it in this 1 to 2 hour webinar training. So the feedback stage is very critical to that. After the feedback stage, and of course I'm sure all of you will pass that, I mean it's not a gotcha thing, you will be put on a review team for CAEP. I've sent all of your information, all of your contact information over to CAEP already, CAEP staff. Our contact at CAEP staff, her name is Elizabeth Vilke, and she has received all of your contact information and is currently putting you into our ELCC reviewer pool. What she will do then is sometime this week you should be receiving from CAEP a conflict of interest survey, and I would ask you to go ahead and open that up, complete it, and then send it back to them. Once we have you in our system, then after you've done that feedback loop, you'll actually be put on a real review team. And don't worry, we know that this is, for many of you, this is your first go round, and so I'll be providing you one-on-one support throughout this whole cycle. So feel free to email me, contact me by phone, whatever, so that you can get any questions answered. The best way to be a reviewer is to learn by doing. That's the best way, really it is. There's no having that kind of experience as you do it is kind of the best experience in training that we could ever give. So that's why we do it this way. Okay, so I've kind of talked to many of you over the phone about the requirements to be a reviewer. These are some of the things that we really look for. To be a good reviewer, really we look for people who can be unbiased and non-judgmental, can take our standards, has a good grasp of our ELCC standards, and can apply that knowledge when looking at a variety of different assessments, and really zero in on the design of the assessments, whether the assessments really align to our standards, and really make unbiased judgments. So you can kind of read those at your leisure. Okay, so this is kind of the review process. Right now, CAEP handles all of the institutions and the program reports for all the different professional associations, and basically they use our reviewers to set up teams to review. And so the institutions submit the reports to CAEP. CAEP then puts those program reports in their AIM system, and then they use the reviewers from our pool to set up teams and then send out the logistical information to those teams. So after you get put into a team, a lot of the correspondence and information that you receive will be coming directly from CAEP rather than me, because I am not part of CAEP. I'm actually part of the National Policy Board for Educational Administration. I'm staff for the ELCC, which is part of that group. And So we have a symbiotic relationship with CAEP in helping them do their reviews. Okay. If you have any questions on that, feel free to type it in right now, or otherwise I will keep moving forward. You will get assigned a login ID and password through AIMS, and one of the reviewers of every 2-member team is assigned as lead. Sue, I understand you did not get. Have you looked at your emails to look for the materials I sent you? I sent you about 12:30. If you did not get it, just go ahead and follow along for now, and when we're done with the webinar, I will send you the materials again, okay? So anybody who does not have it, just let me know that you have it, and then I'll resend it. But everything I'm going over today, I have copies of and will send to you. Okay, so again, it's a 2-member team. One is assigned as a lead reviewer, and the lead reviewer has a little bit more responsibilities for putting the final team report, but you will not be at that stage here. Okay, so here basically it's all done online. It's done electronically. We encourage the team to contact each other via email or through phone. You'll have to basically establish a working relationship with your lead reviewer when you get assigned your team. I would recommend you do that as soon as possible. The lead reviewer theoretically should contact each member of the team, but again, if you haven't heard anything from your lead reviewer, I suggest strongly that you contact them and establish a work timeline and a process for completing your reports. You have approximately 1 month to complete up to 3 to 4 reports, and you will need to establish a timeline for when are you going to get which report done via the AIMS system. So basically you're writing in your comments to the AIMS system on each report that you receive. And then you come together as a team to decide as a team what the final report will look like, which the lead reviewer writes, and what the final program review decision is. Okay, so you're not alone in this. If you have any problem with your teammate, you definitely contact me and contact NCATE. You can see there that NCATE will pay, it says NCATE. When I say NCATE, I do mean CAEP. Okay. They will pay for conference calls if you would like to get together with your lead reviewer. You would just need to talk to Elizabeth Vilke about how to go about that. Okay. The lead reviewer is responsible for compiling the final team report, and we do require that each team member look at that final report and sign off on it. Basically, give the green light to go ahead and submit it. The ELCC is very stresses the importance of this being a team review process, not just one reviewer's. Because without the team, we're only getting one person's opinion and review of a program report. So your input into the final team report is so important, and we really need you to write your report in addition to the lead reviewer writing the final team report. Okay? All right. The lead reviewer is going to be the one that posts the final team report to the AIMS, it says NCATE website, but it's the AIMS system. And both of you are required to get your reports done on a timely basis. That is one area that the audit committee has stressed to me, that if we do not get reports in a timely manner, that will disqualify you as a reviewer in future reviews. That deadline is so important to CAEP as well as the institutions. If you don't get your job done on time, then the whole accreditation process is thrown into jeopardy for that poor institution that has submitted the report in a timely manner. So would stress that when you get that CAEP confidentiality and survey, look at your schedule for that review cycle and be realistic. If you have a huge, lots of events coming up in this cycle, and you know that you're going to have a limited amount of time to do these reviews, I would much rather you say, no, I'm not available to review this cycle, than for you to give the green light and tell CAEP and tell us that, yes, you can review and you'd like to be part of a team, and then go through that whole cycle, and then you find out that you can't do the reviews, you can't finish them. It's just very difficult for us to find a replacement team at the last moment during a cycle. And we really try to be very responsive to institutions and get them the reports on a timely basis. So just be honest when you look at that survey and you find, look at your schedule. Okay. It says down here at the very last point, BOE team accesses all the program reports for their on-site visit. What happens is basically your team reports for each of the programs that you review get fed into the overall accreditation cycle for the institution as a whole under CAEP. The CAEP accreditation system calls for an on-site accreditation visit, and when that's the BOE team, Board of Examiners team visit. And when they go on site, they will call up all the program reports for all the different program areas and look to see what the teams are writing, what the teams are finding with regard to meeting the SPA standards. And that gets fed into the overall CAEP standards for accreditation. And your report is part of that process. Now, the good thing about the program review process is that your report, once the final team report is written, it gets submitted to the AIM system, and then those reports are fed to the ELCC Audit Committee. And that's where it says Audit Team. And it's really the SPA Audit Team that makes the final program report decisions. Okay, so they're going to look over your team reports and they're going to judge and decide whether they agree with you about your recommendation or whether they don't agree. And they're kind of like our second tier review. And they're looking for things like, is the team report fair? Is it accurate? Has it accurately portrayed what's going on with those assessments? Does it accurately look at alignment to our standards? So they're looking for unbiased judgments and things like that. So they're kind of looking at your reports through that lens. And then based on your writing and what you say about a program, they will make the final decision. They will say whether it's nationally recognized or nationally recognized with conditions or not nationally recognized. So you just, in a way there's a second tier review looking at all the team reports, and it's kind of nice to have that there. So then from there, those reports get fed into the AIM system, and then that gets factored into the overall accreditation visit when they go out there. Okay. Again, I've said this a little bit, but you need to figure out what works best for your team in terms of how to conduct your reviews. That's the first thing I always tell you to do. Once you get your assignment, contact your teammate and figure out how you want to conduct your reviews. We do require individual reviewer reports on the AIM system by the deadline. Okay, so it's not one report that's a team report. It's both individuals have to write an individual report, and then the lead reviewer will, in addition, write the team report. Okay, so we do require that you submit your individual report to the AIM system by the deadline. Okay. This is, right here, is the confidentiality statement from NCATE CAEP. I just put it here just to let you know that this is a confidential review process. And being assigned to a team means that you are not allowed to talk about the reports. You're not allowed to copy assessments and use them or share them with anybody. This is totally confidential, and you're not allowed to discuss it with anyone. So for most of you, you are professors and you are probably working on your own reports. Well, this is not the time or place for you to use these team reports or these, these assessments that you review as templates for you to copy and download for your own reports. Okay, so CAEP stresses that with everyone, and so I too am stressing it with you. Okay, so let's look a little bit about what your job is, what your role is, okay? Basically, we're not asking that you look at this like a gotcha activity where you're, going to, get institutions for not having good programs. Basically, we want a very objective review where you basically look at what is written and try to, in some cases, you're going to have to read between the lines, as far as, what pieces they have and what the activities really are, and make some judgments, professional judgments about the quality of those activities, assessment, tools, whatever it is they submit to you, to see whether there is a sufficient degree of alignment of those assessment activities and tools to to measuring candidates' mastery of the ELCC standards. And when we talk about mastery, what we're asking institutions to do is to submit a series of 6 assessments that measure candidates' content knowledge of our standards, what they know about the standards, and also to submit assessments that measure what they can do, how they can apply that knowledge into given leadership situations. So there are 2 kinds of assessments that you're going to be looking at. You're going to be looking at content knowledge assessments, where they're measuring what candidates know, and then you're going to be looking at assessments that measure what they can do, their leadership skill assessments. And basically there they are to measure what their candidates can do with their knowledge in practicing leadership skills. Okay, so the leadership skill assessments tend to be project-based kind of activities or internship experiences or any place where they are acting as a leader in applying their knowledge to given situations. In content knowledge assessments, they tend to be paper and pencil kind of activities where they are measuring what candidates know about topics related to our standards. Okay, so the first thing you keep hearing is me to mention our standards. Well, that's going to be the first thing you really need to read and know and memorize backwards, forwards, and upside down. And when I say our standards, I'm talking specifically about the ELCC 2011 building level standards and district standards. And I'm going to get to those in just a minute to kind of go through those standards. I've sent a copy to y'all, so you should have those. And I want to kind of run through those standards and highlight different aspects of them so that you can be aware, a little bit more aware of them. But that will be your first job, is to really get very proficient in those standards. The other job that you have is basically after you've conducted your review of the assessments that institutions submit on a program report, you're going to make a recommendation as part of your team to the audit committee, the ELCC audit committee, of which Dick Flannery is the chair, on whether to grant national recognition with conditions, or not nationally recognized. And I will go over in more depth what those decisions mean and how you can decide which one of those to give. Okay. You're also required to judge the alignment of the assessment parts, and I'll get into that in more detail too. Each assessment has 3 parts. They have an assessment description, which is usually the activities, the directions to the candidate for completing the assessment. It has a scoring guide, which in most cases is a scoring rubric for judging the candidate's responses to those assessment activities and tools and tasks. And then there's a body of data that comes from using the scoring guide. The data relates directly to the scoring guide that was used on the assessment activities. Okay, so those are the 3 main parts of each assessment. And you're basically looking at those 3 parts and judging the degree of alignment of those pieces to the ELCC 2011 standards. You're also charged with communicating the relative strengths and weaknesses of the program in relationship to each of our standards when you look at those assessments. Okay, and then we are asking that the judgments are all based on accepted criteria outlined in the standards rather than any personal bias. There are some cases where you'll look at maybe the teachers or the faculty members' qualifications, and because that's one piece of the program report that gets submitted to you. And there might be, you look at that and you say, oh my goodness, they're all adjunct professors and they're not even have a background in educational leadership, and this is just not right. Well, there's nothing in our standards that covers faculty qualifications, but that is a good professional judgment about, that has something to do with the program. It doesn't really relate to our standards, but it is a comment that might be useful to the institution and to the BOE visiting accreditation team. So there is a place in the report for comments that are not strictly, that are more of a personal nature, they're not strictly related to our standards. And I'll show you where you can put those kind of comments. But I do ask that if you do have those times when you see those things, that you be very cautious about what you say and how you say it in that section, because you're writing on behalf of the ELCC SPA. It's not just you individually that's writing this report. I mean, you are individually writing it, but you are speaking on behalf of us. And our audit committee really looks at those comments with a group, well, let's just say they're very circumspect about those comments, and they may delete them if they do not feel that they represent the profession. So be careful what kind of comments you make, that the comments that you are making are acceptable to the profession as a whole and to criteria that's accepted to the entire profession, not just you at your institution or you personally. So that's my only caveat on that. Let's talk a little bit about the role of the audit committee. I mentioned the audit team, audit committee, kind of both the same thing. And basically that audit committee is made up of 5 members from the National Policy Board for Educational Administration. Dick Flannery is our chair for that, and he has been for many years. And then there are 4 other team members, and they review every single program final team report that's written. And they will look for fairness and unbiased judgments, and then they will make the final program report decision based on your recommendation. Most of the times they will agree with you and say, yeah, this makes sense. But in some cases, they may have a different view because they're looking at all the decisions they've made over many years, and they will say, well, actually you can't give not nationally recognized because we know that this institution, whatever. And so they might overturn your decision and decide a different decision. Or they might look at a team report and say, well, they've recommended not recognized, but they really haven't made a good case for why. They haven't given us enough information here. There's, some information or whatever. And so they will look at it with a different eye than you will, okay? They look at it more from a policy perspective. They will also do re-reviews of team reports if they have to, if a report is incomplete or that thing. So basically that's kind of their role in this. I am at a breaking point almost with review teams. I would like to take a moment, I'll go through this last slide here, and ask if there are any questions about this section. Things that you don't understand that we need to go over a little bit more depth. Go ahead and type it in, and then I will just keep talking here. We do require that you be objective, reflective, conscientious, and discreet, and I think I've covered all of those. I think all of you are that way. I don't think that's going to be an issue. It's just I mention it because these are things that CAEP requires of all SPA reviewers. Okay, wonderful. We're getting comments in like crazy. There doesn't look like we have anything so far. Everything looks good right now. Good. Okay. Well, thank you very much for those comments. Let's keep going then. Kind of talked about this. Try to stay away from the subjective language, from the humorous, flippant, abusive. We don't get too many of those, but sometimes we do get we get personal comments. Well, at my university, you could never do this, and this is what you need to do, or real personal ones like, well, you need to do this, 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 and this, and none of it has to do with our standards, but it's something at our university we always do, and so therefore you must do this. Try to stay away from those kind of comments because, again, you're not representing you, you're representing us, the ELCC, and we don't have any policies on that. So if we don't have any policies on it, we don't want to have a comment about it. Okay, so let's see. We want to talk a little bit about program report decision making, but before I go through that, I do want to introduce you to the standards. So I'm going to get out of here for a moment, and I'm going to introduce you to the ELCC standards. If you've not already looked at this, I think most of you have looked at our standards before, and I know you haven't read them yet, and that will take a bit. But a couple things I want to point out as you go through these standards. This is the set of our 2011 ELCC building level standards. And this one is our district standards. So they both have two different covers, and that's how you can tell the difference. And basically, these standards are written for any program that's submitted at the district level, and the blue copy is for any program that's submitted at the building level. In other words, principal preparation programs, teacher leader programs, they all are set at the building level, and so the institution will submit a report at the building level. So one of the first things when you get assigned a report in the AIMS system, unfortunately, I'm not going to go through the AIMS system now because a lot of that's confidential information, but once you get assigned your team, your reports, and your login, you'll go into the AIMS system and you'll see all your reports. And what's very cool about the AIMS thing, it'll tell you what the report name is, it'll tell you whether they submitted using the 2011 standards, whether it's a building level report or a district level report, and it's just kind of nice. I mean, you'll see that in the columns. So you shouldn't have any question about whether it's a building level report or a district level report. It'll also tell you whether it's an initial report or a conditional report or a revised report. Let me explain a little quickly what those three mean. If it's an initial report, it means the institution is submitting that program report for the very first time. They've never been reviewed before. And so you will do your full review that we're going to go over in a few minutes, and you'll write a full team report. They also might submit a conditional report, and what that means is basically that they've already been reviewed once or twice before, and the previous team gave them conditions, nationally recognized with conditions. And so what they're doing now is they're submitting a follow-up conditional report for you to look at. In the CAEP system, the same team doesn't always look at the previous report. It gets reassigned to new teams, okay? So sometimes they try to do that, but a lot of times that doesn't happen, so I'm not going to even pretend that it does. But what's nice is that in the AIMS system, you can look at all the previous team reports. You can look at previous report submissions by the institution. You can see everything that's been submitted prior to your review, okay? And that's kind of nice to look at if you are assigned a conditional report. The other thing with a conditional report that's different from a revised report is that in a conditional report, you are only allowed to review material in response to the conditions stated in the last team report. You're not allowed to look at anything else. You're not allowed to make comments on anything else. Even if you find something, you're not allowed to comment on it. You have very limited review. You're only required to look at those things related to the conditions stated in the last team report. The last decision is a revised report. And a revised report means that the institution has been looked at prior to. They've been looked at either once or twice, sometimes 3 times prior to. And there the team gave them a not nationally recognized decision. And so basically what the institution is now submitting a revised report to address the concerns stated in the last team report. And in a revised report, you're allowed to look at anything that they submit and make comments and judgments and stuff like that. So basically you're going off the weaknesses found in the last team report, but you're not limited like you would be in a conditions report. And basically a conditions report, when you see that, it basically means that they're doing something right, they're headed in the right direction, they're there's just one or two things or whatever that they need to revise in order to get nationally recognized. So nationally recognized with conditions is a positive action. It means they are nationally recognized for a period of time and that there's just a few things they're going to need to correct. If you get a not nationally recognized report or a revised report, basically it means they've got some work to do. They have not hit the mark and there's a lot more, and here are all the weaknesses and areas that they need to address. So there's just a little bit of a difference in terms of those types of reports. Okay, so let's look a little bit about these standards. You'll notice that we have 7 standards, and then we have an appendix with reviewer evaluation rubrics. I want you to become very familiar with the reviewer evaluation rubric for standards 1.0 through 6.0 and the reviewer evaluation rubric for standard 7. And also be very familiar with our policies for making program report decisions. Those are instruments for you to use when you're conducting your reviews. So be sure you look those over, okay? The other thing I want you to note as you go through these, I'm just going to go right to Standard 1. In the 2011 standards, we are placing a lot more emphasis of conducting your reviews at the standard level. If you look at this standard, we have 7 standards, and within every standard we have elements that support the standard. You'll notice in the ELCC Standard 1 that there are 4 parts in that standard as you read it that equate to the elements 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4. So basically those elements are pieces that make up that standard. So when you look at the assessments, you should be looking for how they're evaluating candidates on each of those elements within that standard. But your judgments are made at the standard 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 level. So you're looking for evidence of how they're measuring standard 1. And as part of that review, in the assessments, you're looking to see specifically how they're measuring candidates on 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4. Okay, so each assessment should be aligned to a different standard, 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4, whatever. And we require that they evaluate candidates' content knowledge of all of our standards, 1.0 through 6.0, and again, their leadership skills in all of our standards, 1.0 through 6.0. And we actually have different assessments that address each of, whether it's content or leadership, that address those standards. So basically, I have a worksheet, which I will get into in a little bit, that will kind of show you organizationally how that's laid out in terms of content assessments and skill assessments. But as a reviewer, the first thing you look for when you open an assessment is to say, which standard are they addressing? Are they addressing standard 1, standard 2, standard 3, standard 4, whatever? And then if they say standard 1, then I'm going to be looking to see, okay, how are they measuring them on 1.1? How are they measuring them on 1.2? How are they measuring them on 1.3, 1.4? So the elements make up the standard, okay? So that's one thing to kind of equate yourself to. When you write your report, we're going to ask you to write it to the standard, whether standard 1 is met, standard 2 is met, or whether it's not met. Okay, so you see these little charts. After every standard, you will have the series of elements. And after every element, you will see these charts. What these charts are, these are rubric, scoring guide rubric charts for helping the institution develop assessment scoring guides. Okay? These little diamond areas are not standards. They are just evaluative criteria that will be put within a rubric to measure the candidate, the acceptable performance of a candidate on ELCC 1.1 or 1.2. You'll notice there are 2 columns. The first column says content knowledge, most likely to be met in assessments 1 and 2. And then in the second column, you see professional leadership skills, most likely to be met in assessments 3, 4, 5, and 6. Well, what that means is that we have 2 content assessments and we have 4 skill assessments. And when the institution is submitting an assessment, either assessments 1 or assessment 2, and they want to measure candidates on ELCC 1.1, we are hoping that they will use those diamonds as evaluative criteria within the levels of a rubric. So let's say you have a 3-point scale in a rubric, and there's an activity related to visioning, and you want, the institution has said they're going to measure candidates, 1.1, whether they can develop, articulate, implement, and steward a shared vision of learning. Well, there's got to be criteria that go into a levels of a rubric for evaluating the level of candidate proficiency vis-a-vis that standard, whether it's good, great, excellent, whatever. There's going to be levels of a rubric, and you've got to have criteria that go into those levels for judging performance, judging quality performance. And what we're doing is we are actually giving them the criteria that would go into that. So if it's a content knowledge assessment, we are hoping they would use some of those. And they don't have to use all of these diamonds. Please write that down somewhere. We're not asking that they use them all, but we would like to see a majority. If they use a majority of those diamonds, we would say, yes, your rubric is aligned to our standards, to standard 1.1 or 1.2 or whatever it is. So that's kind of what those charts are for. They're evaluative criteria that go into the levels of a rubric. Okay? And you will see that through all of our standards. Every single standard element has a series of these rubrics. They're kind of called rubric starters, okay, for helping that assessment. And then where you would come in is one of the things you look at is you look at the quality of the scoring guides or the rubrics that they submit for each assessment. And when you look at that scoring rubric, you're going to look for alignment to our standards. And what that means is that do the evaluative criteria within the levels of the rubric align to these diamond areas that we outline in our rubric starters, okay, when they're measuring each one of those elements. And that's what they're used for. And if it is, you would say, yes, there's great alignment. And if they don't reference these things at all, you would say, well, there's no alignment between the evaluative criteria outlined in the scoring rubrics and the ELCC standard elements. And that's what you'd say in your report about the scoring rubric, the quality of the scoring rubric. Okay? And that's what we're talking about. So anyway, I'll let you go ahead and go through all of these, all 6. And the last standard element is standard 6, and standard 6.3 is the last one. I'd like to say a little bit about standard 7, because standard 7 is an input standard, and it's all about how the institution designs their internship or clinical field experience. The ELCC is one of the few SPAs that require all institutions to have a clinical internship field experience for all of their candidates. We require that it be a substantial experience and has actual activities related to our other standards, and that it's not just an observation sort of thing, but that it actually provides opportunities for candidates to engage in real-world leadership opportunities where they can practice what they know in our standards 1.0 through 6.0. And that they be meaningful, capstone, and things like that. So that's ELCC 7.1. We also require that the internship, that there is an internship period, or that there are a series of field experiences within courses that all together provide candidates with a 6-month concentrated experience in the field. And in this case, these are building level standards, so all of those experiences have to be at the school building level, school-based environment. If they were the district standards, they would be a district-based environment, that you're seeing a series of activities, and those activities don't always have to be in a, quote, internship. It might be called a practicum. It might be just a series of field experiences within each course where they're sent out into the field. The basic gist of it is that they have to be out in the field doing things that a leader does, and that they have to document those activities, and those activities have to relate to some of the other concepts outlined in the other standards. 1.0, standard 1.0, 1.1, 1.2, whatever. They don't have to address every single element and every single standard, but there have to be at least some of the standards. They can choose which ones, but they need to definitely have outlined that all for you for ELCC 7.2. For ELCC 7.3, they must have a qualified on-site mentor. And you can see what the standard says about that. So basically, in the program report that you get assigned to, you're going to be looking for a narrative response to each of these standards, telling you how the internship / field experience / practical, whatever, how it's set up and aligned to those standards. This is not going to be information that you find within an assessment. Okay, very important. It's not going to be in an assessment that you're going to find this information. Usually it's a narrative that they either attach to the report or look in section 1, the overview section of the program report, and then question 2 asks them to describe their internship and clinical field experience. So most of the time you'll find it in that question number 2 of section 1 context. But in any case, you're looking for information about these. If you find it, what you're going to do is you're going to use the rubric, Program Reviewer Evaluation Rubric in Appendix 1 to rate, because that says Appendix 2, whatever, to rate the quality of it, okay? And let me show you where that is. Here it is. So I'm in, actually, Appendix 1. There's our assessments. I'll get into those in a little bit, tell you which, what they are. There's the content ones on the left-hand side and the skill ones on the right. And then we've got a rubric for you to use to measure the assessments vis-a-vis standards 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, 5.0, 6.0. And then we've got a reviewer evaluation rubric for you to measure the narrative responses that they provide for ELCC 7.1, 7.2, and 7.3. So become familiar with those rubrics, and then that will help you decide whether they're met with conditions or not met. Okay? And I'll show you where to make those comments in a bit. Okay? So basically, those are our standards in a nutshell. The rubric that you would use to measure the assessments, you will see that for MET, you're going to look at the assessments, and you're going to see whether they align to our standards, and you're going to look at the assessment description, the scoring guide, and the data table, and determine whether it's of sufficient quality to determine, to evaluate candidate mastery of either content knowledge or leadership skills across a preponderance of standard element areas. So, and I will go into what that means in a moment so you will understand that a little bit clearer. The last thing I'd like to show you in Appendix 1 is our policies, the ELCC policies regarding making decisions on whether to nationally recognized, not nationally recognized, and further development requirement. Further development required is not nationally recognized, okay? If an institution has already been reviewed before, they get nationally recognized with, or they get not recognized. If they've never been reviewed before, this is the first time they've ever submitted, then it becomes further development required. You don't need to worry about which distinction to make on that. The NCATE CAEP AIMS system only allows you, the choice, national recognized condition, or not nationally recognized. And then CAEP staff will decide what that means, and how to designate it for the program report. So you don't have to worry about that. Basically, to be nationally recognized, an institution has to meet all of our standards, 1.0 through 7.0. And standards 1.0 through 6.0 are covered in the assessments. As you go through and review the assessments, you will be looking to see whether they've provided sufficient evidence for each of those standards. And more specifically, you're going to look at the elements within each of those standards, okay? And I've kind of gone over that a little bit, and I'll go over it more in a moment. And then for standard 7, that was where they're looking, that's that narrative that you're looking for 7.1, 7.2, and 7.3. If they do not pass one standard, you cannot give them national recognition. So basically we're saying that all the standards have to be met in order to give national recognition. The other thing is, that is, based on also that their state licensure data. CAEP has a rule called the 80% rule, And basically what that means is that for any program that has a state licensure exam, they must submit as assessment number 1 the state test data, state licensure data on that exam, okay? And CAEP requires of all SPAs that the program must show you in assessment number 1 for state licensure that they have an 80% pass rate of candidates taking that state licensure exam. If they have less than an 80% pass rate, even though all the standards may be met, okay, you cannot give national recognition as a decision. You have to give national recognized with conditions, okay? So I just mentioned that. Don't worry, the audit committee will be watching that for that also. So that's one of the cases where they might have to overturn your decision if you gave national recognized and there wasn't an 80% pass rate, okay? So I just mentioned that just so you know. National recognized conditions is a positive action. It means that they are headed in the right direction. Something is going right. Something is aligned. It might be the assessment activities. It might be the scoring rubric. It might be the data. But basically it means that they are headed in the right direction and that there is some alignment with the assessments to our standards. It's just that something is either missing or they haven't done one piece right and you need more information on something specific. Maybe that the 80% pass rate that's not met and everything else is. It just means that there's one part that's just, or two parts or whatever, that's just needs more work, and you outline in your conditions what that means. You do not give national recognized conditions if there are major problems in terms of alignment of the assessments to our standards. If there is also, you know, in any of those pieces like assessment description, scoring guide data, and there's not an 80% pass rate, if they don't have enough data, you just can't give recognized with conditions if there's major problems, okay? It just means that they're going to have more work to do. And they have a given, you can see 12 to 14 months in which to overturn that decision and resubmit something. So don't feel bad if you, on an initial report, if you have to give further development required. We do want to make sure that national recognized with conditions means something, that, you know, that they really are headed in the right direction. But that's not to say that you shouldn't, on an initial report, give national recognized with conditions if they merit it. And that's kind of where the audit committee comes in, because they will be reviewing your report and what comments you say, and then they will say, well, you know, we can either back you up, we can decide, you know, in favor that we agree with the team that what you've written makes sense and national recognized conditions make sense, or they can say, well, no, I think they were just a little too harsh and it should be this. So just so you know, the audit committee is basically looking at this kind of level to see whether your comments justify either national recognition with conditions, or further development required. Okay? So that's kind of the standards in a nutshell. I would like to go back a little bit to our assessments. Wait a minute. Let me go back. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about what our assessments are. I've mentioned them over and over about the content assessments and the skill assessments. On the content aside, assessment number 1 and assessment number 2 are designated as content assessments. However, an institution is also allowed to submit some optional assessments. The assessments 7 and 8 are optional. And so you might get a report with 8 assessments, and they can designate those optional ones as either content or skill. And they're kind of like supportive ones. You know, they're required to submit 6 assessments on an initial report. But they can submit more than that if they need to make the case to help substantiate these. So assessments 1 and 2, assessment 1 is always the state licensure exam unless the program report for that program doesn't require a state licensure exam. In that case, they are required to submit another content-based assessment. So it's either a state licensure exam or it's another content-based assessment. Some of the district level programs, superintendent wise, and some states just don't have a licensure exam. And so in that case, a lot of times what they'll submit is another content assessment. But this is required. They must submit either state licensure exam or another content assessment in its place. Okay? Assessment number 2 is another content, and just so you know, they can't submit the same content assessment twice. Okay? All of these have to be different from each other. Okay? They can't submit an activity for assessment 3 and then say, oh, the same activity is going to be used for assessment 5 and 6. That's not allowed. Okay? They have to be different ones. So sometimes you may get a report where they don't do that. In that case, you're going to have to write a comment that, you know, they did not submit a sufficient assessment 3 or whatever it is. On the skill side, assessment 3, 4, 5, and 6 are skill assessments, meaning the activities that you look at should be application of their leadership skills. If you see, let me give you an example. A really good content assessment is like a test, a final exam or whatever, where they're testing what they know. You could not submit that same test and call it assessment 3, 4, 5, or 6, because a test is not a skill-based assessment. A skill-based assessment are things, either a simulated activity, an in-VAS activity, or a real-life experience where they are applying their knowledge and demonstrating leadership skills. Okay, so a sample of what that might mean, if it was a principal preparation program, and for assessment 3, if they had submitted a teacher observation, okay, where the candidates are required to go out in the field and conduct teacher observations and then give feedback to the teacher and coach their instruction and whatever, and they write up a summary of their experience and what they have to do. That is applying their knowledge of instructional leadership, and they're going out and they're doing something. It's project-based. They're applying their knowledge. So that kind of activity would fit very nicely for assessment number 3, because as you read that, the focus for assessment number 3 should be them demonstrating their leadership skills in instructional leadership. So it would go very nicely there. Assessment number 4 is a leadership skill assessment of their internship or clinical practice. So it has to be some activities where they're out in the field demonstrating their leadership skills, and they have to build an assessment for measuring those skills. A lot of times they'll do a mentor on-site supervisor type of assessment of them looking at their leadership skills and then demonstrating whether they can do that. Or it might be a project-based activity where the on-site mentor is supervising them and then they're building the assessment around that. But in any case, assessment 4 deals with the internship clinical field experience setting. Assessment number 5 is called Effects on Student Learning, and all SPAs have to do it. And basically for leadership, it's some sort of project-based activity where the candidate's demonstrating their ability as a leader to support an effective P-12 student learning environment. So a very common one that we see is something regarding maybe an action research project where they're out in the field taking a real-life problem around student learning, you know, and they're creating some sort of intervention to help move the school to increase student learning or something like that. It depends on whether it's a building level program or a district level program. Assessment 6 is another skill-based assessment, and that one, the focus for that is demonstrating their leadership skills in organizational management and community relations. So their common ones might be a strategic leadership plan, it might be a school-based intervention plan, or whatever. It might be a couple of activities dealing with organizational management and community relations, whatever. So there's all sorts of activities that they could give you for each of these. We don't require any one of those, okay? What I'm saying is look for the focus. Look for the focus. The focus for assessment 3 has to be on instructional leadership. So whatever it is they give you, it has to be skill-based, and it has to be focused in on measuring their leadership skills as instructional leaders, either at the building level or at the district level. So if this were a district level report, you'd be using the district standards, and those activities would have to all be set at district, within the district. So for assessment number 3, A teacher observation is a fine activity for a building level program, like a principal program or a teacher leader program. But if it were a superintendent program, that would not be acceptable for the ELCC. What would be acceptable is designing a district-based policy or district-level professional development plan for faculty, for faculty across the district. So again, it would have to be district-based, and it would have to apply for whatever position that program is intending to train. So if it's a supervisor, we wouldn't be, we'd be looking from a supervisor point of view, or if it was a special ed director, we'd be looking at it from that point of view. So the activities and assessments have to match up to what the program is and how the program is, what the focus of that program. I'm going to take a moment here for questions.